Jai Guru, everyone.
Thank you. Welcome to the Awake Minute by Minute podcast. We are on minute 26, and I'll host today Chris. And with me we have Priyank and Mike, as always. Hello, guys. How are we? Priyank, you were just away on a trip. You got back from a lovely trip to India. How was your trip?
Yeah, it was beautiful. I went on a pilgrimage. As you guys know, me and the wife like to go on pilgrimages, and so yeah, it was very good. Went in search for some spirituality in the Himalayas. There's some very ancient temples and energy spaces, and unfortunately didn't meet Babaji, but maybe next time.
That you know of.
Yeah. That's true.
He wasn't there that you know of, yeah.
True.
And Mike, how's the iced lattes on the western coast of the US?
Haven't had one in a while. It's a good idea. I went to Encinitas on the weekend, also in search of pilgrimage. Maybe not like the Himalayas, but yeah, nice place.
Very nice. Well, very, very happy to be back at the minute by minute analysis, and we have a change of tone for this minute. Really, I noted looking back over the last minutes, there was after the young Mukunda's mother passing away, there was a period of very somber, serious material there that we covered, and we shifted to look at more of an adventurous, joyful, optimistic tone where Yogananda was on this search for his guru. And then now again we've shifted gears in this minute to more of a, let's say, real life of a aspiring yogi, where Yogananda or Mukunda is really having to work hard for to earn his stripes, really, isn't he? So we have a minute whereby Yogananda is with his guru, his master, Swami Sri Yukteswar, and we see scenes of young Mukunda in his teenage years, cleaning with a very rudimentary looking brush, just doing his chores, really, with Sri Yukteswar, watching over very intently, just literally standing over him as he does his chores. And then we have scenes of pictures actually of Sri Yukteswar and a very young Mukunda, and we can go over those in more detail in due course. But Mukunda meditating in an open doorway of a building, with again Sri Yukteswar watching him very closely, and making sure that he is indeed both doing his chores and meditating properly. So really, this is a minute all about the work beginning for young Mukunda on his journey of self-realization. So let's jump into it, shall we? So we have in the very early scene where Yogananda or young Mukunda is cleaning, and we have a narrator's voice of Yogananda saying, "My guru could not be bribed even by love." And there's talk about egotism here, and how Yogananda had certainly ego at this stage of his life, and Sri Yukteswar was working with him to uproot it. But first, I wanted to touch on the very mundane subject of chores. So we see Yogananda doing his chores. Why is it important to do the chores? And what is the importance of doing your daily chores? And secondly, can you do your chores with a smile? Priyank, how are you with your chores? Do you do them with loving intent, with masters, songs and praise singing through your mind? Or
I actually relish simple jobs like chores, because they don't require much thinking. I don't like to think. Chores, when you're doing mundane, quote, mundane things, it's like a pickaxe. You're working away small chunk by small chunk on yourself, on resistance, any resistance that you may have to supposedly menial labor, etc. So I really like doing menial things. do it with involvement, and for some reason I get a great sense of achievement. Feel like I'm kind of losing myself a little bit, and time does go pretty fast when I do it. And I feel like it's much more efficient than doing that something that requires a lot of thinking and creativity, and yeah. But
Would you agree, Mike? You're nodding intently. I see some agreements there, but if Yogananda was there saying, right, Mike, you've got to sweep my floor day in, day out and make sure that everything's clean. Would you do it with a smile?
Wax on, wax off, Mike.
I think, of course, there's probably moments where rather than sweeping the floor, you'd rather just lie on the couch and not do that. But I agree with the sentiment to do simple jobs that have a beginning and an end and everything. Like my work is usually just sitting in front of a computer and programming something, and the tasks are often not very well defined, and you always have to look for solutions. And like having something, and especially when you say you can do it for the guru, it's twice as rewarding. It feels really good, like when you're able to serve in your local group or somewhere. It's very nice. Doing my chores at home and saying I'm doing my laundry for the guru, that's a bit of a step up. I guess I have to do a lot more visualizing to make myself believe that. But yeah, I do agree with the sentiment that simple jobs are nice because they have a beginning and an end, and you feel like you have that feeling that you did them. It's great.
And
it
reminds me, do it for God, do everything for God. Yeah, it's easier said than done. I think whenever you've got a stack full of dishes to clean. Although I would tend to agree with you, Priyank. I actually quite enjoy the mundaneness of. It's a meditation for me, really. And I heard there was a line in Buddhism where there was a monk, I think, there that said that they can become enlightened through doing the dishes, and they would just scrub away all the karma, in the meditation, just time and time again. So I like that idea. But this got me thinking of one of the teachings. Maybe it's more so in the lessons of SRS. So I can't go into too much detail, really. But you guys probably know the story of there was a young devotee out in the jungles somewhere in India, and he was getting very lazy and didn't want to do his chores, and he was saying that he would rather be meditating, and he would actually left and then ended up finding a spot to meditate. And as time went on, he accrued more and more responsibilities, and then eventually he was leading the same life, if not a life with more responsibilities and chores and things to do than before. So this is something that to me is almost inevitable. We have these seemingly mundane aspects of life that there really is no escaping for most of us anyway, unless you have somebody to do them for you 24/7. But there's joy to be found in everything, right? And it does make me think that life is wondrous in every single aspect. And even with these things of cleaning the dirt off any surface can be there's some wonder in it. So there is probably more appreciating the very minute natures of reality to the natures of reality that we all want to focus on, which is the wondrous and the magical and the novel. This is something we have to do every single day. So yeah, I like the way they included that in this minute, and I liked how they included the presence of Sri Yukteswar literally standing over young Mukunda when he did his chores. And it speaks a little bit to the style of let's say teaching that Sri Yukteswar had. So maybe we can kind of delve into that a little bit before we go on. Sri Yukteswar, guys, tell me what was he like, Mike? What was he sort of known for as a guru? And we've talked about it before, would you prefer his style of leadership and teachings compared to maybe Yogananda's? And what was the difference between the two? That's about
I'll get back to which one I would prefer later. I think Sri Yukteswar is he was known to be very direct. He wouldn't hold back, and that kind of like the way Guruji describes it in the AY is that the close disciples that knew who he was, that knew that he knew God, they revered him like no one else. But people who didn't know what was really going on, they felt often hurt, and they came once and they got a blunt response and they never came back. And Guruji remarks a lot on that. He also says that it was important for Sri Yukteswar to be financially independent because he didn't want to have to, how do you put this? Like he wanted to be able to have his style and his bluntness with everybody. He didn't want to depend on anybody. So he had those properties and he was able to be self-sufficient. And he talked to Guruji when he entered the hermitage. He said, "You will have a different style with your chelas." And that's good because when you go to the West, they will not appreciate the very direct, blunt way that I have. And as to what would I prefer, I don't know. I'll take either one, I guess. As long as you know that he's a God-realized master, he will get you there. I'll take whatever.
Very good, Priyank. Yeah. What are your comments on Sri Yukteswar's style of guruship?
Sri Yukteswar appeals probably most to me out of our lineage. Sri Yukteswar, you can see his method quite clearly. With Yogananda's methods of discipleship or training, it's kind of like he's different in different scenarios. He's different to different people. It's much more love, and as Yukteswar intimates in the autobiography, that was his way. And the Hirimasha is this kind of ethereal figure that you sense that his training was much more subtle. Do your kriyas, I'll help you, but you won't necessarily see my help. You won't see my helping hand, even though it will be quite obvious to someone who's an outsider. And Mahavtar Babaji is obviously on the completely other end of that scale in terms of knowing anything about him and the work that he's doing. We read with wonder and awe at the stories in the autobiography and the Yogi about him. But Sri Yukteswar, for me, I think his personality and his approach for me, would work wonders. I thrive with discipline, as you guys probably well know about me by now. So I think it would, for me personally, would work very, very well.
Mm-hmm. I was saying before we jump on this call, I reckon, Sri Yukteswar's style of discipline would go down really well in this modern day where discipline seems to be, from my perspective, very much lacking in the world, So I think there's a real need for the balance, right? And, Yogananda, I've heard stories of Yogananda being told by monks who were, with him, that they would, at times when there was maybe negativity in conversation, Yogananda's face would look, he would look away and he would then have a face of, righteousness and his eye was always on the prize, of, keeping his mind on God, keeping his third eye on God, and really being a very positive individual. So they had the same discipline expressed in different ways, from what I can understand it. But Guruji was much more softer with his approach than Sri Yukteswar's. And Yogananda describes it here as stuff in the documentary, that the flattening of his ego was very hard to bear at times, and it was like uprooting his diseased teeth from his jaw. So it really describes it in quite a poignant way to say, like, he was getting hammered on probably every egotistical, thought, word, or action. And of course, Sri Yukteswar would often come to him in his meditations and say, either you're not meditating properly, you need to kind of get to it. He would always know exactly when, what was going on with Yogananda. So he wouldn't have had anywhere to hide. And we see these pictures here in the next scene of a very young Sri Yukteswar, looking absolutely splendid in his full head. What would you call that? Is it
turban?
Indian?
Say turban. Yeah.
Turban, yeah, turban as well. So looking wonderful in his turban and in his garms. And then a rather disheveled-looking Yogananda or Mukunda, looking almost, would you say, tired or a little bit ruffled and very, very somber looking on his face. What do you guys make of this expression on his face? Priyank, what do you make of this picture?
Yeah, again, I think this picture might have been taken around the time where he was, we had those two pictures in the earlier minute when he was setting up the school and we had all those teachers around him, his students around him. So yeah, no, again, this is a different aspect of his personage. And yeah, obviously it's quite unique. It's quite, every picture that he is in, of that we have of him, it has carried a very different energy and a different feeling. And this also is in that same ilk.
Yeah. Like what was your impressions when you saw this picture of Yogananda pop up? It's a very different picture to the one that we meditate to.
Yeah, he looks very young. I was wondering, how old is he there? Like, he was born in 1893, right? So then he would have finished school at 1911, 1910, something like that. In 1920, he was already in America and he was 10 years in the hermitage. So he was about 17 years old, I guess, that picture. Yeah. I mean, it's the pictures of young Mukunda, they look great because you hear all the stories of him and sometimes the mischievous things he did, but then most of the pictures I see from him being young is like being somewhere meditating, and he looks like, if you look at his eyes, they look so focused. They look like I know exactly what I want from life.
Yeah.
Do not get in my way.
Yeah. He tended to be, from my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, quite a purist in his ideas. He wanted to meditate, didn't he, Yogananda? And he often talked about organizations, kind of his attitude towards them is a bit of a, deep breath. Really, is it necessary to do this? Why can't we all just simply meditate on God? But he learned and he came to realize, I believe, through Sri Yukteswar, that with the value of organization, and he obviously went on to do wondrous things with the skills that he received during his time in the hermitage. And I think it really was his attitude towards having to do the nitty-gritty dirty work, the hands-on organization and cleaning that he probably had to overcome over these years. So yeah, very good images to show the contrast of a very young, youthful, energetic looking Sri Yukteswar with a bit of a tired looking Mukunda. So kudos to the documentary makers for that one. I think, Priyank, you had a bit of a reading to read out. Do you want to do that now?
So the autobiography of Yogi very, very eloquently describes what Sri Yukteswar was like, and I really liked some of these passages. I'll just read them out. His every utterance was measured and chiseled by wisdom. A sublime self-assurance marked his mode of expression. It was unique. He spoke as none other in my experience ever spoke. His thoughts were weighed in a delicate balance of discrimination before he permitted them an outward garb. The essence of truth, all pervasive with even a psychological aspect, came from him like a fragrant exudation of the soul. I was conscious always that I was in the presence of a living manifestation of God. The weight of his divinity automatically bowed my head before him.
Very, very profound, Mike. What's your take on that? Would you feel this emanating from the pictures of Sri Yukteswar? Every time I look at the picture of Sri Yukteswar, I get what Priyank just read out there in the form of a look. You have this thing.
Yeah, it's like Priyank said earlier that he seems to be like the disciplinarian of the gurus, definitely, and like and with disciplinarian it comes also like, I mean, I never saw him in person, but this composure, this like he talks only when he says something, it's very meaningful, and so he's always very present. And that's kind of, it all fits in with the kind of image of Sri Yukteswar. And some people get this just from looking at this picture, how he means business.
He's not to be trifled with. So we have a very strong image, and strong message being communicated to us through these pictures and videos that the documentaries show. And so I really like how they've done it. And there was something interesting by the narration said about teachers. Some teachers might tell you to believe, and then pull out your eyes of reason. But Sri Yukteswar was very much, the individual who wanted to teach discernment and rationality and logic and reason to his disciples. And the way that it was put here was, I want you to keep your eyes of reason open. And that was very significant to me when I heard this, because this is really what the foundations to me of SRFR, is it not? The science of yoga. Mike, what's your take on this? What do you think he meant by keeping your eyes of reason open?
You have to see it in the context of the time as well. And we are in the, like when somebody, especially back in the day, I guess, went to a swami and to a renunciant and was looking for counsel, that's really like, you are not in, it's not a scientific place, right? You're in a place of like, almost like a place of worship, and it's like religion. And it's how you can compare it to, like, when you're in the West, you go to a church and you ask your priest. I'm not sure if you can really compare it like that, but and he always cared about the latest scientific discoveries, and he always liked to connect the dots, and this is this kind of notion of combining science and religion together. I think that was always at the forefront. And I feel like a lot of his disciples, they found that super exciting. And maybe that's also an important trait that you need to have when you're a guru in the Dwapara Yuga.
Mm-hmm. I think the actual language, just to correct myself, was I will open in you the eye of wisdom. So the eye of wisdom is, quite an abstract term. How do we ground that into, our understanding? Priyank, what do you think is meant by eye of wisdom?
So going back to your previous question, he doesn't want anyone to be with him through blind faith, blind, just blind worship, which obviously a lot of people do. He wants Yogananda to experience his divinity through wisdom and through intuition, and that's what that eye of wisdom is about. And he's saying that he will he will help him open that eye of wisdom. So until that eye is open, don't just accept, don't just believe everything, you know, I'm telling you. I want you to actually experience it. And very few people, very few teachers can offer that kind of counsel, because, you know, when you're in, for example, in school, if you're taught the equation for like gravity and things like that, or weight, mass times gravity, then you just get told these things are mass is this concept, mass is measured in kilograms. What's a kilo? What is mass? You're blindly believing these expressions. But with this teaching, it's a very dynamic process in its learning, and it doesn't want you to accept any minutia of just blind belief.
And he goes to taking the skill of having opened his eye of wisdom. He goes on to interpret things like the Gita, right? And he was given this as a key, to unlock the truths of the world, wasn't he? So it's the greatest gift, isn't it? It's the give a man a fish and he can eat for a day, versus teach them how to fish and he can feed himself in the village, sort of idea. And he's really, when I hear all this, in this very short minute, there's so much echoing throughout the teachings of SRF, isn't there? Which Yogananda really talks about, of discipline, of focus and concentration, but of wisdom, and there's stories, throughout, as I mentioned earlier. There's other ones, on belief as well, isn't there? So it's kind of directly linking through, the lineage of gurus, just passing these wonderful teachings one by one, onto us, these hundreds of thousands of disciples across the world, having these little ripples after these one-to-one private conversations of Sri Yukteswar to Yogananda, and then the ripples are really turning into waves. It's a real great thing to kind of see, because they do quite a good job of showing it being quite an intimate relationship between Yogananda and Sri Yukteswar. It's very one-to-one, and we see this in the next scene, where you see, young Mukunda meditating in what seems to be just an open doorway in a building in the hermitage, must be. And again, Sri Yukteswar standing outside, gazing down at him, and Mukunda, must have realized it and looked over and sees his master standing there and tries to go back into meditation. Just before we jump on this call to record, Priyank, you were telling us about your trip to India and how you were in these wonderful temples, but around you there were various distractions. So, it must be quite distracting for your master to be there, at the same time as inspiring for your master to be there, because that your master will know that whether you are truly meditating or not. So what's been your experience? Have you had any kind of similar experience where you've got like a presence around you? I struggle to meditate with.
I would hate that. Imagine if you were being watched whilst trying to meditate. It's like even when people are watching you doing just day-to-day activities, you'd like, no, don't watch me. I don't like to be like to be stared at, let alone Sri Yukteswar watching him as is depicted in that scene, watching him meditate, and then Yogananda looks and then goes back into his meditative state. And in the previous minute that also happens, when he first meets him and they're meditating side by side, Yogananda looks up and Yukteswar is still meditating, so then he decides to go back into his meditation. But no, I used to hate that, especially when my teachers used to watch me. And sometimes they do it to psych you out.
Yeah. Where's the strangest place you've meditated? Mike, I'll go to you for this one first. Where's the strangest place or most unique place that you've meditated?
Not so strange anymore. I feel like when I was young and I would meditate in public, I had such a hard time focusing. I was so self-conscious. I was constantly thinking, what are they thinking of me? And now this is just, it has become a normal thing. I mean, it still depends on kind of where you are and stuff. But like if you're now sitting in a train station or in an airport and you meditate, I really don't care anymore. Like this is just, I'm like, oh, I need to get my evening meditation in. Let's do it here. That's it. I mean, airports even have those kind of prayer rooms now where you can go. I went to a few of those. Those are always interesting places. Yeah, but
that's Yogananda's favorite place, isn't it? A world of religions coming together to pray and meditate.
Yeah, that's the idea of it. I didn't really find it that way when I came to those, but and it's different in different countries. Like I remember I think it was Frankfurt Airport, they had one prayer room for Catholics, one for Protestants, and one for Muslims, I think. And I was like, what are you doing, man? You're trying too hard. Stop it.
but it's kind of defensible as well, defendable, because I once was in a prayer room, multi-faith room, they sometimes call it, and there was a Muslim chap, and he had the prayers on loudspeaker. And I was like, oh, thanks for that. That's really, really helpful for someone that's not listening, wanting to listen to your specific
God challenging you, Priyank. You still have to go deep and fight.
not there yet. But interestingly, Chris, back to your question. Today, I mean, just very recently, I've got a very cheap Casio watch, and I've started to use, for the once in my life, I've used that function where every hour it beeps. I don't know if most Casios have this. And I thought, I thought I'd use this to every hour, if I can, to step away from what I'm doing and do just even a 1 minute meditation. And today I was at work, and I had a clipboard in one hand. I was looking at some part, and so I like this engineering part that fits on a train in another. And I was in this like corridor which had like hundreds of shelves of stuff, and behind me there was loads of workers and things like that. So I had this thing, and then my beep went off, and I was like, okay, if I just close my eyes now, everyone's gonna like see that I'm doing something weird, like with my eyes closed and standing. So what I do, I'll face the wall and have the clipboard up here, so it will look like I'm reading. So then I did that, and I had a really, really good meditation. And all the while people were like hammering and stuff behind me. It was so good.
Yeah, just a note to listeners: don't do that if operating heavy machinery. Yeah. Oh, yeah, my 1 hour beep is coming. You're driving a forklift truck or something, or a lorry, or.
And then someone, when I told one of my friends this when I was on the pilgrimage, he said, "Oh, you don't need to. You shouldn't need to rely on the hour beep for that. You should do it like, at all times." And I was like, yeah, I'm not really there yet. I need the hour beep reminder.
Well, that was going to be my next point was, Yogananda talks about being completely immersed in God 24/7, and I find the only way I can do this is if I have a chant going on in my mind, where that is keeping me somewhat in tune with a meditative or prayer state. That is the only way. I mean, listeners, share your hints and tips, because I think the three of us would certainly, I can speak for myself, be open to learning and developing some techniques to being constantly immersed in God. But yeah, I have a similar story at work. There was a prayer meditation spot a few years ago, and I would go in there and try to find the eastward position. I just found myself in a very really awkward angle in the room that somebody came in and probably wonder what's going on. But it's
I've got a
getting
good
more possible at work to do these things. But yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, that's true. It definitely is much more possible. But in reference to Sri Yukteswar's elevated, exalted position, in the autobiography it writes, always one with the Lord, he needed no separate time for communion. A self-realized master has already left behind the stepping stone of meditation. The flower falls when the fruit appears, but saints often cling to spiritual forms for the encouragement of disciples.
Yeah, sort of goes back to what Mark was saying, a guest that we had on two episodes ago, I think it was. He was questioning as to whether or not Yogananda was actually going through these events and challenges and experiences, so just solely for our own benefit. And I suppose in a paradoxical way, you could say both things might be true, that he simply was going through it himself, but also doing it for us. Both might be true in the same instance. But just when you said that, it reminded me actually. Sorry, Mike, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I'm pretty sure he only did it for us. I don't think he did it for his own sake.
Yeah. We talked about this, haven't we? He was awake in his mother's womb, so how much more do you need? But it reminds me of a story of Sri Yukteswar kind of going into samadhi state and the breathless state when Yogananda was in the room, and it was when he was lying down sleeping, right, or just in the early morning time or something like this. So he was all in samadhi states almost constantly, Sri Yukteswar, from the stories that we've heard, which is really wonderful. So moving on, the next part in the documentary, we talk a little bit more just about the 10 years in the hermitage, as it was said, that were passed. And we didn't go into too much detail on that in the documentary. So there's obviously quite a lot that happens in there. And we know from the autobiography of Yogi, a lot of these stories, and I'm sure we all have our sort of favorite stories in there from what happened when Yogananda was in his master's hermitage. So Priyank, maybe do you want to share one or two of your favorite stories that come to mind?
Sure. So he firstly, he had his Kriya initiation through Yukteswar in this part of the story, and although he had received the technique twice before through other disciples or descendants from Lahiri Mahashai, this was obviously, he said, it was a completely unique and different experience, and the light of the light in the spiritual eye was glowing, and he says something along those lines. But moreover, the initiation is not just about receiving the technique, it's obviously about establishing the guru-disciple relationship. And we are reminded that meditation isn't the goal. So the technique isn't the goal. The technique is the means to attain to the goal. And that is why, Sri Yukteswar's initiation for Yogananda, even though he already had the technique, was so important. And that's true for all of us, whether or not we are yet have the technique. Because lots of, you can probably read the technique on the internet, but that doesn't mean that you have been initiated. There's a very, very big difference. Yeah, and there's other stories that we can go. But what do you think of that part of the story, I suppose?
Like, I'll let you jump in first there.
Yeah, it's really about, like Priyank said, the guru-disciple relationship. So when they, one of the first conversations that they had when you go in the autobiography, you see there they talk back and forth. Like Guruji has like he tells him, you move back in with your parents and you you go to college, and he was like, no, I'm done with school now. College, I don't want to do that. But he was like doing all those things. And then the last question he asked him, will you reveal God to me? And then he says, a master's promise is like, once you have it, it cannot be revoked. So Sri Yukteswar doesn't give it to him lightly. He says a 1 hour conversation ensued, and they talked about it. But in the end, Sri Yukteswar said yes. And then Yogananda describes it like a heavy burden came off him, and he felt like he finally found this guru that will show him, reveal God to him. And that is really the goal. And I guess like that's also what Kriya initiation is for us when we get that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Yogananda talks about this quite a lot, doesn't he? You know, whatever path you choose to try to find God, stick to it steadfast, you know, and commit to it. And talks a lot about the committal that what you put in, you get out. So instead of doing that, you know, many people might look to a dozen or 2 dozen or whoever so happens to be in the town, you know, talking about God that day. You know, they would go around and you know, follow many different teachers, but the importance of the guru-disciple relationship is also depicted in the Jesus and John Baptist story. The lineage is very important to stick together through many lives, you know, and work together to overcome all the obstacles. So yeah, awesome. Thanks for sharing that, Mike. I mean, for me, there's a couple stories that maybe just it kind of resounded to my ego and kind of struck a chord with me to some degree. There was one where I think Yogananda was quite jealous of another devotee that came into the hermitage, and this boy seemed to be given favoritism by, I think it was Sri Yukteswar, right? And this boy wasn't the best disciple. He didn't show up, you know, on time. He wasn't very reliable, you know, to his meditations and to his duties. But still, he was looked upon very fondly by Sri Yukteswar. But there was a course of events where he was given warnings, and you know, you've really got to get your life back on track, or else, you know, you're going to kind of fall off this bandwagon. And the warnings weren't heeded, and lo and behold, you know, the things happened that you know, Sri Yukteswar and others had envisaged. And really, it taught me a lot about the discipline that Sri Yukteswar had for himself and for his devotees, and the realism of you can be so close to finding, you know, your answers in life, to finding God, knocking on the doorstep, being with a realized being like Sri Yukteswar, and still mess it up. You know, you can come very close. So for me, you know, that was like one of the stories in the hermitage at the time that really kind of struck me, that, you know, there's a whole lot of work. And just to go back to the theme of this minute, there's a whole lot of work that needs to be put in to the disciple guru relationship, and the meditation and doing your chores and so on and so forth. But yeah, that's just me. So really, for this minute, I think
there's a few other stories. First of all, we wanted to say, yeah. So in amidst all this stuff, in this minute, let's just talk about stuff before he became a swami. So there was a few very nice stories. There's the 2 penniless boys in Vrindavan. This kind of happened at this sort of time. Interestingly, in the autobiography of Yogi, it was placed in between first meeting with Sri Yukteswar and officially joining, you know, the 10 years in the ashram business. So there's that. And Mike and I did a fantastic little play over one Christmas, didn't we? Fundraiser or something at the London Centre. Maybe we can, Mike, let's track that video down. We can post it or not. We can post it on our Instagram. I think that would be pretty cool. But yeah, there was that. And then there was the fact that, as Mike said, that he carries on his studies. Yukteswar asked him to carry on his studies. And obviously that delighted his father. And then he also told him to return home. And again, that delighted his father. And then as a bargaining chip, as Mike mentioned, he said, you've got to promise to reveal God to me. And then that whole thing happened. So there was that quite cool thing. And the other funny thing is that apparently Yukteswar was a very stupendous snorer. And I also am a stupendous snorer. So, and my name, Sri Yukteswar's name was it Priya Nath? Was it Priya Nath Kara? That's it, which is similar to my first name. So I like to think I'm similar to Sri Yukteswar in some minute ways. But interesting things happened when he was in college. I'll just read out a section from a biography, and you guys can jump in as to the relevance of this at the end. Mukunda's limited attendance at college produced a new friend who would remain an integral part of his life and work for almost 20 years. His name was Basu Kumar Bagchi, and he was almost exactly 2 years Mukunda's junior. In Mejda, Basu is described as talented, intelligent, and religious-minded. He and his Brahmin family were devotees of Baduri Mahashaya, the levitating saint. And he, at Mukunda's suggestion, was initiated into Kriya Yoga by Swami Kebalananda. Basu and Mukunda became so inseparable that at one point, Basu lived clandestinely at 4 Garpur Road because he could not find enough privacy at home to meditate properly. Years later, as Swami Dhirananda, he would serve as Yogananda's collaborator and chief lieutenant until their bond suffered a heart-breaking rupture. So this is later on we'll get to know more about this heartbreaking rupture that between Swami Dhirananda and Yogananda, Paramahansa Yogananda, as it would have been at that point. But this was the moment in his life where they first met. So it was at this time during the 10 years in Master's Hermitage, which will be very relevant for our future minute. I can't tell you exactly which one.
Mm-hmm. And it's so interesting. I guess a lot of the spiritual people that he worked with later on in the school in Ranchi, and also people who helped him with his work, carry on his work in India while he's going to America, he met in those 10 years while he was at the ashram there. And I didn't know about this story, but it makes sense. I'm guessing this is from the Phil Goldberg.
That's right. That's right. And there's that other bit in the autobiography where Yogananda's getting massacred by mosquitoes, and the famous line that Sri Yukteswar then tells him, "Be rid of mosquito consciousness."
I've tried it so many times.
Yes. Yeah. Rid yourself. Just as they're biting you on the temple. Rid yourself. The mosquito doesn't exist. I do not exist. This world does not exist.
What I found so interesting about that story was that he actually tells Yogananda to go out and buy mosquito nets. And he says, don't just buy one for yourself, buy one for me as well. Otherwise, it will all bite me. And then later on, he goes like, yeah, you can set them up or not. But it's really something that is about your mind. And then I thought, maybe when a mosquito bites me, it's really my fault because I'm in mosquito consciousness. But I feel like it's more like with his divine powers, he could tell the mosquitoes not to bite him. So I'm not sure if the moral of the story is don't buy mosquito nets. I feel like it is more like a demonstration that if you are a divine yogi, you don't need them.
I've got a, you go on, Chris.
I was just going to say that to add to that, it's we talk about this reality as a creation of our own consciousness, to the degree of which we want to experience, certain aspects of life and living, and maybe it's the resistance of the mosquitoes to try to fight them for the injustice of it happening that is what often goes through my mind. But before I can get to this blissful state of non-mosquito consciousness, I bought myself a mosquito net here in Brazil. I'm working on it most days, but I'm still waking up to one or two.
Do you have mosquitoes that are like the size of your fist? And
oh God, no.
I've seen some colossal ones.
Thankfully not. No, there's just an army of very small ones that you can see in the vision of the periphery. But
do they annoy you by buzzing past your ear, and then you're like, mosquito consciousness?
Yeah. Well, it's funny. Barbara's my fiance has told me, this is a good thing that whenever they wake you up in the middle of the night, then you can meditate more. I guess so. I'm not waking up naturally at 3 a.m. to meditate, so thank you, mosquitoes. Yeah, not quite. Priyank, you had another story to share. Go ahead.
Did I? I can't remember now.
I think so. You had. I think actually you talked about the condition that Yogananda or young Mukunda would agree to.
Yeah, that's so I think Michael already mentioned that. But in that, they said an hour-long verbal tussle ensued, and it said a master's word cannot be falsified. The implication in the pledge opens out vast metaphysical physical vistas. A guru must be on intimate terms indeed with the creator before he can obligate him to appear. I sensed Sri Yukteswar's divine unity and was determined as a disciple to press my advantage. You are of exacting disposition. My alarm just went off. Then master's consent rang out with compassionate finality. Let your wish be my wish. And that the way that he's concluded that is so beautiful, isn't it? It reminds me also from that section in the autobiography when Mahatar Babaji is agreeing to stay on this physical plane, and he responds to someone saying, if it makes no difference whether you're here or there, well, why don't you stay here forever? Then he said, fine. He kind of says, God spoken his wishes through your lips, and it reminds you of such poetic language, isn't it? It just inspires you to read more poetry, but everything's in the autobiography of Yogi. But this hour-long verbal tussle that was ensuing, I was thinking about that. I wonder what stuff they were talking about.
Probably testing him, right? He was probably asking him questions like, wouldn't you prefer a wife and children or something like that?
Interesting.
Probably trying to make sure that
Mike, you play Sri Yukteswar and I'll play Mukunda. So, will you promise to reveal God to me?
So, do you even know what this means?
You've got the hard job, Mike.
Do you promise?
God is everywhere.
But I can't see him. Do you promise to show him?
God only reveals himself to the ones he wants to reveal himself to.
Chris, you try. This is a stone wall.
I'd rather be Mukunda because I've got questions as well.
Go on, ask him. Mike is in the Sri Yukteswar mode. Ask him.
Master, what is the best technique to knowing God?
Kriya Yoga.
Bingo.
Plus devotion. Plus devotion.
Yeah.
Very nice. Very nice. Very
nice. Good, lovely guys. So by this minute, really, we know more about Sri Yukteswar. We know more about the hermitage early days, and it's taken us up to quite a similar minute next minute. So with that, do we have anything that we would like to add? Anything we missed or would want to include that we didn't? Priyank, is there anything from yourself?
Yeah, so the last line from the minute kind of talks about the wisdom. In addition, I'll open in you the eye of wisdom. And this scene it's like he's bestowing the divine vision or the samadhi experience. So I think we'll talk about that in the next minute in some significant detail. But I think that's what that line and that scene was portraying, because kind of light, the halo light comes out of that image.
Yes, sorry, that's right. Yeah, and it's there's a rather eye-opening part in the autobiography about this, isn't there? On what Yogananda sees and how he experiences it, and does a pretty good job at describing what must be quite a difficult experience to describe in words. So yeah, we can go into that in more detail next. But Mike, is there anything from yourself?
No, I think we've covered it all.
Lovely. Well, with that, thank you very much for
you.
joining us.
Thank you very much, Chris.
Thank you, guys.